I want to move on to glutes because I know that is just in the sort of final part of the interview because that is really what you're known for. I think what do they call you? The Godfather of glute training. Is that one of your titles that you're proud to own?
Yes.
So explain for me and others because I thought that's your glutes, but as I've learnt more about you, there's a little bit more to it. So explain the different parts of the glutes and how they work in a very simple way.
All right. Well, the glutes are the glute maximus, glute medius, and glute minimus. Okay. So glute max down here, glute medius is up higher, and then the glute minimus is underneath the glute med. All right. Now the glute max does kind of 5 things, I guess you would say. It does hip extension, but also does posterior pelvic tilt. They're similar. Posterior pelvic tilt is kind of like hip hyperextension, but it's turning the pelvis upon the femur, not the femur upon the pelvis. Now it also does hip external rotation, and then it also does hip abduction. Now the upper fibers tend to work a little bit in the frontal plane with the glute medius, but in the transverse or horizontal plane, the lower fibers are more involved. And so you basically would never just want to do one movement for the glute max. And then the glute medius, their role differs and there's also 3. So there's a for the glute max, there's a lower and upper subdivision. For the glute medius, there's an anterior, a middle, or a medial, and then the posterior heads. For the glute medius, I've heard there's 2 versus 3. It depends. That's not as studied. But bottom line, you have to do multiple exercises to work the muscles. You don't just do one, you do a variety. So, if you look at my rule of thirds, where a 30 exercise should be vertical hip extension exercise like squats and lunges, 1/3 should be horizontal hip extension exercise like hip thrusts and back extensions and kickbacks, and then 1/3 should be lateral or rotational like lateral band walks, seated hip abductions, and band standing abductions, things like that. Then you tend to develop all the muscles, all the heads, but not just for the glute maximus, but also for the glute medius and minimus. They all get maximally developed that way.
A friend of mine, Pete, I think we were talking before this, and he sort of said, why do you think that the medius being so important for pelvic stability and gait doesn't get as much love from the training community?
It's this. Well, it's so important for function, but it's not talked about in bodybuilding. I mean, I think I can't explain it. I'd love to hear other people's opinions. I think it's a homophobic thing it started out as, because think about back in the day, and it's still this way. It's so weird, because I know bodybuilders. I'm friends with some of the top people, like not friends, but like colleagues with them, and what's your workout? Well, I do chest and tris on Monday, then I'll do legs on Tuesday, then I'll do back and bis on Wednesday, I'll do shoulders on Thursday, and then arms on Friday. Oh, leg day, what do you do for leg day? Well, for quads I do this, and for hams I do this. And they never mention glutes. They will mention traps. They'll mention all 3 heads of the delt. They'll mention the biceps, the triceps. Sometimes they mention the forearms. They'll mention the pecs, the upper pecs, the lower pecs. They'll mention the abs. They'll mention the lats. They'll mention the upper back or mid back. They'll mention the erectors. They'll mention the hamstrings. They'll mention the quads. They'll mention the calves. But some muscles you never hear of, the tibialis anterior. You don't hear about the QL, the multifidus. You don't hear certain muscles you never hear about, but the glutes are the biggest muscle in the body. You don't hear about the glute medius or the glute max very often. And lately, it's weird. In men's bodybuilding magazines, you never hear about it, but women's magazines, it's all about the glutes. And I feel like I've helped change that a lot. I helped create this whole niche. Before me, people did squats and lunges, some RDLs. Even girls would say, I like that seated hip abduction machine. Men would go, no, that's stupid. I like kickbacks. No, that's stupid, just squat. And I came along and I invented the barbell hip thrust, and I not just the hip thrust, all the different barbell glute bridges, hip thrust variations, single leg hip thrusts. But I also said it's okay to do kickbacks. Do your kickbacks. Do your back extensions in glute dominant manner. Round your upper back, turn your feet out. Do all this abduction movements. Do them with bands, do them with machines. And it changed the way people train their glutes. If you look back to the 70s, at how Arnold trained his pecs and his delts and his back and his quads, and then you look at how the guys today train, sure, there's some nicer machines now, but it's pretty much the same. What did they do for legs? Well, squats and leg press and hack squats and leg extensions, and for hamstrings, some stiff leg deads, and then the 3 different types of leg curls. And what do they do now? The exact same thing. Except maybe some of them like this new pendulum squat that's at the gym or something, or some new machine. But now, you look at Arnold trained his pecs. Guess what he did? Well, he did bench press, incline press, he did weighted dips, he did flies, he did crossovers. Guess what they do now? That same exact thing. Nothing's changed that much since the 70s for any muscle group except the glutes. And now the glutes have done a complete 180. They weren't trained at all. No one talked about them. It was just assumed, and I think Vince Gironda had to do with this. He told people, do not train the glutes. In fact, don't even do squats, do hack squats and do them frog style to maximize quad and take your glutes out of it, because it's unsightly if the glutes are undeveloped. So it's just this weird thing where they never talked about glutes. They still don't. And then now you look at how they're trained, and they're trained totally differently. They're trained according to the rule of thirds now, which I came up with, and you see people hitting them from all the angles, and glute development is way better than it used to be. Now, for the males, it's not necessarily their training, they're just on better drug regimens, and they get these shredded glutes, and they can get glute development from all the leg training they do, but not so much women. The bikini competitors, they're doing so differently. They're doing their hip thrusts, they're using their bands, they're doing all the different exercises. They love all the different glute exercises. And you look at how glute development has changed in bikini. If you look at, I think the first was 2009, I think. And you look at who won in 2009. It's crazy. Then you look at 2010, 11, 12. And you look at each, if you put a picture of each, you'd be like, whoa. They have changed, the glutes have changed dramatically over time. It's completely different now. And I think that that's very telling, because it coincides exactly with how the training started shifting.
What do you think the glutes are harder to build than others? Is some of it down to, I speak to women about this, and it's obviously they all want that kind of nice shape, but is it a lot of it genetics, or can you make a kind of real measurable difference? And I have seen a lot of your pictures on it, but can you do it just by training in the right way, following some of your philosophy?
I don't think they're harder. I think it's like every other muscle. Like what muscle came easy for you? Do you have one? Like for me,
actually, my glutes.
Your glutes.
They're always. As a kid, they were just always there.
You were made fun of for having glutes as a kid. Mine was my pecs. I always had those lines. I don't have to work hard. I can just do close grip bench and still have pecs. I don't even have to do wide grip. I don't have to do crossovers. I will always have pecs. And then I'm lucky to have some calves. Some guys cannot get calves to save their life. And think about what muscle is hard for you to develop. For me, my delts, I've always wanted to have bigger delts, and same with my glutes. My friend Paul has bigger glutes than me, and he never even trains them. His first time hip thrusting, he hit 405 for reps. I'm like, cool, it took me 2 years to get to 405, And it's just genetics. 60% of this is genetics. And so some of these women have such great glute genetics, and it's sad because they're almost the worst people to listen to. They are the worst people to listen to because they don't know how to get glutes. All they have to do is lean. They could do cardio and lean out and have nice glutes. There was this woman, Jen Selter. Yeah, she was the queen of the Belfie. Yeah. She was so popular. She made the Belfie popular back in the day, like the butt selfie, And I remember she had
Belfie, I didn't know it was called that.
Yeah, 13 million followers right off the bat. I think she stayed put. I don't think she cares. But anyway, She had this amazing physique. It was what people were so intrigued. How does she have such a big butt and these small legs? It's funny because in the bodybuilding world, people are like, well, I want that glute ham tie-in, which, by the way, the glute ham tie-in back in the day was you don't want any protuberance between the glutes and the hams. You want it to be this smooth, and I'm going, I don't want, that was more for figure and stuff. You don't want it, you want the hamstring so big that there's no crease. And I started telling people, no, you do want that. You want the glutes, you want to see this roundness, and then you kind of want smaller legs to make the glutes look bigger. That's what got popular. Look at the girls on social media that got so popular, you know. Some of these women just with nice glutes have, 10, 20 million followers just for having nice glutes. And it's genetic. It doesn't mean they train them intelligently. So it's about 60% genetics. Now, I don't say that's with everything. That's with guys too, with some guys just have huge pecs and they don't have to train them hard. But there's still a lot to it. There's still a lot you can do. But, I've heard all these theories about, gluteal amnesia and all these things. And
what is gluteal amnesia? I was going to ask you about that.
I mean, it's a made-up thing that doesn't really exist. I said it back in the day. I love to use this NASM terminology that's outdated. It's like, look, because, if I say this to you and I'm trying to get you as a client, I'm like, listen, you have gluteal amnesia. Like, listen, you're sitting right now. You sit half the day. While you're sitting, you are shortening your hip flexors. Look, your hip flexors, your hips are bent. You're shortening your hip flexors. You're getting adaptive shortening at your hips. And this is going to interfere with your glutes because not only are your hip flexors tight now, you now have reciprocal inhibition of your glutes. They're now shut off. And now you have to rely on your hamstrings and your adductors to extend the hips for your weak glutes. And now you're getting synergistic dominance. And now you're going to have hamstring injuries and adductor injuries and problems all up and down the chain because your glutes are dead and they don't activate. And, it's just, I've also heard it called dead butt syndrome. And it's silly. Like, the glutes still activate. They just are deconditioned. Mm-hmm. If you walk around, if you felt your quads and just stood up from this sitting position, they get rock hard. If you walk up a flight of stairs, your calves get worked. But in everyday life, our glutes don't activate that highly. They're not, in everyday life, you go take stairs, you take one step at a time. You don't take 3 steps at a time and work your glutes. You're not sprinting. You're not jumping. You're not squatting deep. You're not hip thrusting anything. When you pick something up, you just stiff leg it. You don't bend down, grab it, chest up, knees out, squat it up. So everyday life doesn't activate the glutes that highly. And so it's deconditioned. You need to strengthen it, and just get stronger at these basic movements.
Right.